in exchange for an international financial rescue package.
But the price of shares on Wall Street have plunged this evening over fears that the Greek debt problem could spread and halt the global economic recovery. At one point, the Dow Jones was down nearly 1,000 points. Our Europe editor, Gavin Hewitt, reports from Athens.
In a busy Athens side street, people came to lay flowers at the bank where 3 workers were killed yesterday in a day of violent protests. The Greek president says the country is on the brink of an abyss after rioters set fire to buildings in protest at austerity measures aimed at reducing Greece's debt.
Even if it was employees' bank or employees of another store, it's unjust.
But the protesters were back on the streets today as Parliament prepared to vote on a package of spending cuts which are necessary in order to qualify for a massive bailout. The Greek Prime Minister George Papandreou said the future of Greece was at stake.
Today things are very simple. Either we vote and pass this bill or we condemn Greece to bankruptcy.
So what exactly is fueling the protests? Greece will have to find 30 billion euros of cuts over 3 years. Public sector wages will be frozen until 2014. The retirement age is being raised from 61 to 63. VAT is rising from 19 to 23%. But as police try to prevent further demonstrations, doubts are rising as to whether the government will be able to enforce the cuts.
I'm personally fed up with this. I don't really know what they will do.
After the violence, the big question is whether the government will still be able to implement its spending cuts and tax rises, or whether they'll be sabotaged by protests. And if that was to happen, it would put in jeopardy the entire bailout. With the crowds once again outside Parliament, ministers were insisting there would be no retreat. They would not back down.
We're quite confident that the Greek people will support the measures. We don't believe that it will be a matter of just standing firm. It will be a matter of persuading everybody that these are absolutely necessary measures.
With the situation in Greece so unstable, other European countries with big deficits are under pressure, and the danger remains that this crisis will spread. Gavin Hewitt, BBC News, Athens.
Let's speak now on the phone to Dr. William Mallinson, who's a lecturer at the State University in Athens. He and his Greek wife are off to join the demonstrations. Dr. Mallinson, thank you for taking the time to talk to us. Have you ever taken part in a demonstration before?
Twice in my life. Once against Margaret Thatcher when I was a student because she was taking the milk away from the schools. And this evening, yeah, and on May Day.
Why do you feel so moved to take part in the demonstrations that are going on tonight?
A deep sense of frustration and anger, and by the way, I'm at the Ionian University, but it's a state university, with the fact that a lot of ordinary Greeks who already earn a very small salary are having their salaries cut by up to 20% arbitrarily without consultation and being made to feel guilty for having caused a problem which is the result of corruption at the high political level and big business.
Do you believe, though, that Prime Minister Papandreou inherited this financial mess and that these demonstrations may actually jeopardize confidence in the ability of Greece to deal with its financial crisis?
The problem started in 2002 when Goldman Sachs bankers came over to the then PASOK government, in which I think Papandreou was a minister at the time, and somehow persuaded him to get into the European currency by giving false statistics to Brussels. Since then, matters have got worse and worse and worse, and a lot of European money has disappeared into politicians' pockets. Can I please say, though, that Greece is not the only corrupt country. Germany has had some of the biggest scandals imaginable. The US government has just accused Daimler of bribing 22 governments. Siemens has been bribing Greek politicians a lot recently.
Sorry to interrupt, Dr. Mallinson, but I'd just really like to ask you about how your standard of living has been affected.
Terribly. Look, I'll be quite blunt. A lecturer earns 1,600 euros net after tax. That's not very much to support a family. Now he's having his salary cut by a further 20%. which means recourse to more and more loans at the banks, which in the end actually will destroy the Greek economy in any case. We think that those who are responsible should be put on trial, and a lot of their money ought to be legally expropriated unless they can prove that they've paid their taxes, and that money should go towards solving Greece's economic problems, not arbitrarily reducing already minute salaries. A new policeman earns about €700 after tax.
Well, Mr. Papandreou has said that he is going to pursue through the courts politicians who, as he sees it, have been corrupt and contributed to this financial mess. But I just want to bring you back to a question I asked you a couple of minutes ago. Do you think that these demonstrations, obviously there is a lot of public anger there, but do you think these demonstrations could be counterproductive?
No, I'd like to think that they'll clear the air and that some of those responsible will actually be brought to justice. I think the Greek people as a whole are far more responsible than people give them credit for, particularly since the people now in the streets are your normal thinking Greek. They're not your Saturday night hooligan people looking for trouble. These are responsible people. They're concerned about their country. They're more concerned about the secret agreements that have been going on between the IMF, for example, and the Ministry of Defense. Greece spends more on defense than any European country as a proportion of its budget, and nobody knows what is going on behind the scenes there. And they think that Greece has been targeted rather than Britain or Portugal or Spain, which have similar economic problems and corruption because of Greece's strategic position. And they're wondering what is going on behind the scenes. That's another element of, I'm afraid, and it's not conspiracy theory, because Greece is a very weak point of the European Union, and there's no better way of weakening the euro, which benefits Germany in the short term, but is slowly destroying Europe and making it into a great big floppy organization without its own political will.
Not all of the protesters, though, you talk about the peaceful protesters, not all of the protesters have peaceful intent, do they? Some elements of the demonstrators are using the wider demonstration, which I accept is a peaceful one, to launch their attacks, as we saw yesterday, to such horrific effect.
Absolutely correct. You will always get, statistically speaking, a small percentage in any country. I remember the poll tax riots with Margaret Thatcher, of very violent individuals who will cause trouble just for its own sake, to give vent to their own personal frustrations. We've seen that in every country. You will get a bit of that, I'm afraid, but I think it's essentially controllable.
OK, Dr. William Mallison.
Sound overly sensationalist. By the way, Greece is quite safe for tourists, I can assure you.
Well, it certainly needs its tourist industry at the moment. Dr. William Mallison, thank you very much.
Well, our correspondent, Duncan Kennedy, is in Athens for us this evening. And Duncan, I don't know if you could hear that. We were hearing from a British lecturer at one of the state universities there. We've also seen many youths in these demonstrations. Is it fair to say that those upset by the crisis, by the austerity package, come from a wide cross-section of society?
Yes, it's the only answer you can give to that, Louise. It's one of those things that affects millions of Greek people. As that man was saying there, your guest was saying there, the violence is only ever carried out by a small minority. Yesterday it happened to be quite a big small minority. Tonight it's on a much smaller scale, hundreds of people involved, and just a few dozen of those actually involved in the clashes. But the people involved in the problems of all this policy and this issue stretch right across Greek society. We have spoken over the past few days to police officers, to nurses, to teachers, university professors, and they all come to you with those same central issues, that the austerity measures the government is imposing on them in such a short space of time are draconian. We are talking about, as that man said, cuts of between 15 and 20% in their monthly budget. And these are people with families, those people who could afford to have their own apartments and what have you. It's a real cut. And they don't earn that much in the first place. So they are extremely angry. The vast majority of people are not interested in any kind of violence, but they are interested in trying to persuade the government to somehow soften these measures in some way, try and get their hands on that international bailout fund, yes, to try and soften the measures that affect people's daily lives. And at the moment, there doesn't seem to be any possibility of that. The government seems to be saying we have to drive through these measures right now in this short space of time. Otherwise, the international community won't give us the money we need to bail ourselves out. It's a really difficult problem, and it does affect millions and millions of Greek people.